Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, back to another episode of the SDSU podcast. I am your host Andre Hagberdian, joined as always by Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
What's going on, Andre? Feeling good?
I feel great. It's a short week. Boise's coming to town on Friday.
Yeah,
Oregon State.
It's kind of funny. It's supposed to be like a short week for the players, but we have to do all of our work early too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny. During the press conference this week, Des Malone was asked about how he handles a short week, and he was talking about how you have to kind of trick yourself into thinking like Tuesday is really Wednesday.
There you go.
And then somebody followed up with like, well, do you ever miss class? Because
I heard that was
the wrong day.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I don't have any class on Friday. And then I think BCD was like, I only have one class this semester. So yeah, it was funny. Like, you have to trick your mind to think that it's a day later. But you're right. All of our stuff has to be pretty much a day earlier, which is fine.
Yeah.
All right. The Oregon State game did not go obviously as the Aztecs would have liked. They lost 26-9. There was a moment in that fourth quarter where, you get a 2-point conversion and you make it a one-score game. Didn't happen, and they gave up a 75-yarder on the next play, and pretty much the game was over. But the Aztecs fought hard. They play hard. The issues from the UCLA game, somewhat in terms of the missed tackles and the not playing hard enough, were a lot better, but they still gave up some big plays. Damian Martinez had over 100 yards, and the offense struggled to basically finish in the red zone, which Oregon State is really good at. So,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been following. You get the things that we put on social media, and you get a lot of the common refrains. Complaining about the team. Been thinking about how kind of contradictory the main takeaways that I've heard from fans. On the one hand, fans will talk about how Hoke and his staff doesn't recruit at a high enough level to be competitive with teams like Oregon State. And then on the other hand, there seems to be a large contingent who believe that San Diego State should have played better than it did and should have beaten and competed with Oregon State, which would mean that they recruit high enough to be able to conversely, if people are saying they don't recruit high enough, the expectation that San Diego State should be a top 15 team perennially is a pretty high expectation because, of course, that's who Oregon State is. I think I walked away from that game, which, was there. I thought that Oregon State had a workmanlike mentality and knew it was the better team and kind of just played as the better team without like a huge amount of urgency. The flip side of it is I think there's a lot of positives that you can take out from a game like that if you're wanting to. I think you had a great stat in your preview about how many drives crossed midfield for the Aztecs. It was at 11 of 13.
9 of 11.
9 of 11. That's an incredible number. And I talked to Jalen Maiden after the game and about why it was that right around midfield, so many times their drives would get stalled. And would have assignment errors, they would have penalties, they would have something that would just kind of derail it. We'll get into our grades right now, but I thought overall, there was a lot of positives, especially if especially if Oregon State is as good as their rankings suggest they are.
Yeah, I'd love to take the credit for coming up with that stat, but I got that from SDSU media notes, so which we get a lot of stats and information from, and they're awesome. So shout out to Jamie and the crew there. All right, let's start with quarterback, Jalen Maiden.
I'm gonna give Jalen Maiden. Oh, gosh, it's tough. I'm gonna go with an A minus. I don't feel like he had a lot of help. We'll get to that going forward. But I thought he was by far the most competitive offensive player. He doesn't get an A plus because I did think that he left a few passes out there. He mentioned post game that there were 3 touchdowns that he could have had if he had had good throws. And I think that's accurate. His one, 3 on Penny early, he missed. He missed 82. Jay Rudolph in the end zone, he threw high. And then on the interception that he threw in the end zone, I think that if he had thrown it up high, it would have given Mark Redeman a chance. But even with all that, 256 yards, always playing from behind. I thought he did a lot of really good things. I thought he found some things that worked for him. And I think that, he played the kind of game that if they can add a running attack to what he did, their offense can turn pretty potent.
I feel like you're reading off of my cheat sheet because I had an A minus.
Always, bro. Come on.
And
anyone who's listened to us long enough knows the truth.
The first thing I wrote was did not get enough help.
No.
he also led the team in rushing,
right.
59 yards if you don't include the yards lost via sack.
Completely.
So talk about having to do everything. He also had 4 drops from the wide receivers.
Huge drops.
That, he could have been 24 of 32. I know we did this with Josh Nicholson last week with his drop and what that would have meant and Blake's drop. You can't keep saying, add the drops into the stats, but still you got to factor that in. But yeah, I thought he gave them a chance to win or at least stay in that game. And he didn't get a lot of help. He got sacked 6 times. So maybe you could say he held onto the ball long, but those are third downs. If you get sacked on first or second down and that ruined that drive, you could say, well, you should have thrown the ball away or you should have ran. But on third down, if you throw the ball away, you're going to have the punt anyway. Obviously you don't want to lose the yardage, but on third down, he's trying to buy time and make something happen. So you can't fault him for taking a sack on third down as opposed to throwing the ball away when you're going to punt anyway.
No, I agree with you. And sometimes the pocket was both sides. I mean,
yeah,
it was that, and yeah, I just thought that they didn't give him a lot of help outside of that. So, what did you give the running backs?
I had a C minus.
Okay.
Jalen Armstead scored a touchdown, so the only touchdown in the game. But otherwise, I didn't see much from the running backs. Keenan Christian didn't get going at all. Armstead, I think, had 48 yards on 11 carries, which is a good average. It's above 4, but his longest run was 10 yards. Cam Davis didn't do much. He had two carries for -1 yards. Kristen had a couple catches for 34 yards, so you got to factor that in, which is why maybe the grade isn't worse. But I just feel like they didn't, just like we said, Jalen Maiden didn't get any help. Well, the running backs were part of the group that didn't give him the help that he needed.
Yeah. No, again, stealing off of your notes, I have the exact same line for the exact same reasons. I did think that they were good in the screen game. They were good in the dump off passes and being able to get yards. Some of those Keenan Christian ones, I thought, along with 16. I thought the screen that went to him, I believe it was a play action. I just thought it was really well thought of and designed. And I'm just curious because I think, and we'll get into this with maybe a little bit of the offensive line, but it seems like the last 2 years, everyone says that the deepest position group is the running back. And now we are, a full non-conference season, into this year. And the running backs are kind of doing the same thing, which is, they're okay. They're doing fine, decent averages, but you're just missing that explosiveness that San Diego State used to be really known for. And the running game, I think, as you pointed out, against, those FBS opponents, which have all been really good defensively and have excelled in games outside of San Diego State. Yeah, they haven't found it. And if they are truly the most skilled position group, then I think you continue to point to the offensive line and you say that, like, they got to be better. But yeah, C for the running backs for sure.
Wide receiver, I went with a C there. No Makai Shaw, he's the number one guy. So you got to factor that in. Breon Penny had a career high, 6 catches, 77 yards.
Mm-hmm.
He did some nice things. But 4 drops, we just talked about how, that hurt the passing game. Didn't get in the end zone. Didn't make enough plays other than the Breon Penny, 6 catches to move the chains and help Maiden out. Some of those sacks were made in his buying time. He's waiting for wide receivers to finish their routes or come open, and they either didn't or he didn't see them. So I went with a C.
Yeah, I mean, we're batting 1,000 in equal grades, and I know badly. Can we just, for this week, can we just break a rule? We're going to give Breon Penny an A, and then we're going to give everybody else a C. I just think that he's very exciting. He's just an exciting player if they can get him the ball, and it was great to see. I actually thought that they looked like a competent receiving group. I thought for the first time all year, and we've talked about how they've had incompletes in the lead up to this, and it makes me want to go back and say, no, they were just bad because they caught crossing routes. I thought Balin Brooks's deep ball down the sideline, 24 yards or whatever it was, down the sideline right in front of the bench. I thought that was a great reception, a tough catch. But, I thought they really found some with some of those underneath crossing routes. And there were a few times, where you're just like, man, if Penny could have made one guy miss, they could have been better. But those drops just kill them. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And Josh Nicholson, whether it was 2 or 3 drops, it was maybe 2.5. There was a tough play that, like, really good receivers are able to get. And then 2 that I'd say are definitely drops. I think was it Wesley or Balin Brooks who had another one?
Wilson had 2, Wesley 1, Balin Brooks 1.
Okay, well, there was one on an RPO that was just like he was wide open, and again, they're not going to move the chains and they're not going to do those things. So I definitely think, Kai Shaw not being there, not traveling, I think it hurt the team. Hope post game, he wasn't so sure. He said, I'm not sure how much it hurt it, but he starts for a reason. But there's other guys who need to step up with, that mentality. I thought for the first time all year, you could really see that the wide receivers were getting open. They made plays after the catch, that they looked like what you would expect a D1 receiving corps to look like. And I think that's the positive going forward, provided that they can start moving on the ball.
All right. Tight end, I went C+.
Okay.
Mark Redmond, had a good game, 4 catches, 77 yards, matched Breon Penny, 77 yards. But, Rudolph didn't do anything. Rudolph on that 2-point conversion, you got to get in on that. I think he had an opportunity to get in. You got to fight harder and move the ball across the goal line. That I just thought, like, where he caught the ball and where the defender was, he should have gotten in, and he didn't. He was like inches short. Obviously, the running game didn't. Taking a page out of your book from last week and having the running tight ends be involved in the blocking in the running game. Obviously, we talked about the running game not doing much, and so I factor that into a C+.
Okay, well, I had him as a C, but I'm not going to break from you. C+. Everything you said is the exact same reason why I said it. I thought Redmond had a very good game. I think that, you get 77 yards from him. Obviously, you would have liked him to have got a shot at that touchdown at the end, but I don't really put that on him. I thought he did what he was supposed to do. Again, I mean, we talked about this, that, like, there's certain players in San Diego State when they play teams with higher talent, that need to like be there and be present. And I thought Redmond was. I agree though with the running game. You're going to have a little bit more, especially because so much of that comes from two tight ends.
The offensive line, what'd you have for them?
I'm a D, bro.
Okay.
No, you didn't. Knock it off.
Yeah.
See, look at you. Look at you. You've been doing grades now for 4 weeks and you're able to give hard grades now. That's good. I just, 6 sacks, at least 4 of them are going to be legit. If you say a couple of them, maybe you should have done something else. But I mean, that's where you become really good. You just give your quarterback a lot of time. I didn't think there was a lot of holes for the running backs we talked about. It's just something is amiss with the offense. They only scored 9 points. Yes, turnover in the red zone. Yes, 2 missed field goals, but those are long field goals. And, it's just inconsistency, right? Because they're able to move the ball every single drive. So they have the ability to be able to block. It just seems like there's they get 2 plays and then 1 play they can't. Those missed assignment errors, those missed blocks, whatever it is, it just came back to haunt them. And every time, by and large, that Oregon State, needed a big play defensively, it came from up front or a linebacker, somebody blitzing or something like that, where the offensive line didn't protect Jalen Maiden or spring somebody for a bigger run.
Yeah, I gave them a D too. I did give them a D last week too, so it's not like I was going soft on anybody or anything, but
No, that's right.
But yeah, I agree. 70 yards rushing total, the sacks. I think they all speak for itself. Moving on to defensive line. I went with a C-. They had 1 tackle for loss the entire game from the defensive line. No sacks. Didn't get a lot of pressure. Tupu had some nice moments, but there's just a lot. Damian Martinez had 105 yards on 14 carries. He was able to break free into the second level a lot. 102 yards on 15 carries. And I just thought the defensive line really didn't match up well with the Oregon State offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would just, since now we can't be the same for everything, I would give him just a regular C. I thought with Damian Martinez, he has a long early in the game of 43 yards. And then he has 14 carries for 60 yards after that, which is good, but it's not 15 for 105, if that makes any sense. And so I thought that they played better as the game went on, and at least in that regard. I also thought that the way just San Diego State was defending him and the way that Oregon State was spreading everything out, they depended on their defensive line to win with numbers. And while they didn't necessarily do that, they obviously weren't gashed for huge runs after that first initial one that we just talked about. As far as pressure on the quarterback, again, I don't watch Oregon State's quarterback very often, but you definitely could see on Saturday why he won't be, if what he is on Saturday is the actual kind of quarterback that he is, he won't be an NFL quarterback for very long. He might, he'll test well and do all that stuff. But anytime there was any semblance of pressure, he was inaccurate with the football. And so I thought that, the defensive line, you would have liked to have seen them have more pressure, or if they weren't going to get pressure, to have gotten their hands on a few more balls, or stop some of those screen games because they read some of those jailbreak screens, as Coach Hope kept calling it. But, I didn't think that it was horrible. I did think that, had a couple of times where they stopped them on first downs for either no gain or a loss, and kind of tried to get them in some of those difficult things. So I thought it was an okay performance. That obviously, they're going to need more if they're going to, turn what has become, at least yards wise, a pretty porous defense.
Moving on to linebackers, what do you have there?
Linebackers is harder. I think Cyrus Fieseu has turned into be their best linebacker. I did think that, some of those middle screens to the wide receiver, I really felt like those were the plays where you saw Caden McDonald a year ago. I thought you'd see Michael Shawcroft kind of sniff those out on more than one. It was like there was nobody there. It was just like, that instinctual play that just kind of where you can make a play outside of the script, I thought was not there. And given the who that these players are supposed to be, I think that's a tough thing to have up to play with. Cooper McDonald. I didn't see him around the quarterback as much. He seemed to be neutralized there. I thought Trey White. I thought he almost had the game changing play of the game where he had a great job of getting his hands on the ball. And it just seemed like live. It just seemed to like hover almost. It was in the end zone where my spot in the press box was. And so that's a good play, and you like to see some of those kinds of things happen. But I think you need something more out of Cody Moon. I think he had one good pressure early, and then you didn't really see much of him the rest of the game. So overall, it's the same C grade. I think that the middle of the field continues to get attacked, and you either have to stop it with pressure or you have to stop it because you figure out what they're doing and you're able to stop it.
Yeah, I hate to do it, but I had a C too.
We are terrible.
That 75-yard touchdown to Gold.
Yeah.
He was lined up against Noah Tumblin. The slot guy, I think it was a tight end, came over and blocked Noah Tumblin for Gold. Eric Butler, who was covering the slot, he kind of drifted outside with the tight end or with the receiver. And as Gold went middle, Cody Moon was the guy there. He's the one that whiffed on the tackle. So, if he can at least maybe not even tackle him, but to make him divert his angle or get a hand on him where he slows him down, then the other guys could have come in. But he completely missed them. And that next thing you know, he goes 75 yards. So I had a C there too. Corner, I had an A.
Yeah. I mean, it's that same thing. It's like, how do you judge that 75-yarder, right? If that's Tumblin is supposed to stop it, then maybe it's a little different.
Well, here's the thing: Pro Football Focus gave that touchdown to Tumblin because he was on him. When that's the problem. That's where we get into problems with Pro Football Focus. Is that really something that should be credited against Noah Tumblin, given the fact that it was a screen and he was blocked right away? You know what I mean?
I completely agree. It's a team game, and it's hard to do what we're doing in to be able to separate it. But I had an A as well. I did not. I'd have to look. Maybe you have it in front of you. If you have, I didn't see Dallas Branch play. I saw Chris Johnson play for both, like one series at least for Malone first, and then for Tumblin. I thought both of them had.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to pay attention to that. And, I saw Chris Johnson for one series for both of them switch sides. But I thought, again, the cornerbacks played fantastic. And again, I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer to know if teams are just so successful up the middle. They're like, why are we throwing to the outside? But, these receivers at Oregon State, I think, they were different than the receivers that they played against UCLA outside. They were smaller, shiftier. I thought it was great that Noah Tumblin had that interception on that 50-50 ball, which seemed to be like kind of his bugaboo of the last couple of years. But I thought that they were terrific once again, and they have yet to face a test where they don't look like the better players.
Yeah, the rise of Noah Tumblin from 5th on the depth chart at corner to, fighting with Des Malone for the top corner spot has been a very impressive. Picture that Don got of the interception, pretty sick.
Oh, bro.
I knew when I saw that in the folder, I knew I had to put that in on my Monday article.
Yeah.
Non-conference recap. But yeah, that was a sick picture.
Yeah, no, when we were there, the internet didn't work on the field, so a lot of times Don will do his work there. So he came up to the press box, and he was sitting to my left as I was finishing the recap. And at one point, he kind of nudged me, like, "Bro," and I was like, "Bro," it was a great shot. It was a great shot. Yeah, just absolutely great. And I mean, just one of those things, like Don sacrifices time, his money to be able to go to Oregon State and to cover the team. As a result, there's a picture that wouldn't exist if he had it. And so I thought that was a great play. And again, any idea that Oregon State was pumping the brakes, was not showing what they were trying to do, was not trying to run up the score, like that whole sequence just makes that
Yeah.
complete sense. They tried to go as long as they could.
All right. Last defensive position, safety. I went with a B.
Ooh,
I thought the tackling was a lot better. We talked about that 75-yard touchdown, about who that's a whole team probably
probably.
over a certain position or a player. Said Barfield had another interception. He's tied for the lead in the nation with 3.
Yeah.
I thought they did a lot of good things. DJ was less than 50% completion on
Yep.
the day. Now he had a lot of yards, and the 75-yarder definitely played a part in that. But as you talked about, didn't have a ton of places to go, and he wasn't super accurate. And I think the safeties did a good job there. Not as good as the corners because they still gave up some plays. But I thought they were good, and I thought they were got a lot better than they were the last 2 weeks.
I thought it was interesting how they played it. It seemed to me that by and large, it was Devon Celestine who played most of the
Yeah.
snaps along with Barfield, mixed in some Eric Butler in there, and I thought in general their rotation was a lot smaller than it had been at every position. It'll be interesting to see if that was a matchup thing, or if they've kind of figured out who they want to be able to play. But yeah, they're never going to be perfect, but B minus is what I'm going to give them, just to make sure I'm way away from you. Yeah, I thought that, like, if they play like that, I think they're going to be okay, with the caveat of that huge play just such a huge time. And that's obviously going to be a huge key against Boise, is making sure that they earn every yard that they get, instead of allowing them that huge play.
All right, let's finish it up with special teams. Probably the lowest score I'm going to give this group is a C minus. Jack Browning made a 52-yard field goal, so it's hard to really go with a C minus when someone made a 52-yarder, but he missed a 49 and a 48. He had a punt average of only 38 and a half.
Right.
3 of 6 inside the 20. He's not doing kickoffs anymore, so that must be something that he either went to Coach Deacon about, or Coach Deacon decided to do to alleviate some of his responsibilities, and it didn't, at least for one day, didn't necessarily help. So I went with a C minus.
I'm just going to go with a D minus. Yeah, and again, we always talk about this, you grade on a curve. And the expectation is that you depend on Jack Browning. And so, yes, those are not gimme field goals. Those are not anything of the sort. But he's got to make those. And if he makes both of those, I think San Diego State can kind of be in the game. And obviously the one late, they were going to do onside kicks and stuff like that. So especially that first one, I just thought it just set a bad precedent. I didn't, the punts, some of those, because they did such a good job of moving the ball into Oregon State territory. Some of that stuff you can't kick deep,
Right.
But then I also thought that, Keenan Christian had 3 opportunities, and, he had one really good return where they kind of like faked it to 29, who was coming around on the other side, and kind of went forward. But it's the kind of game they needed something big from special teams in order to be able to maybe do something with it, and they didn't get it. Their special teams needed to be far superior, I thought, to Oregon State's in order to maybe get time in the game, and just that it wasn't is why I would go there. But it's probably objectively what you said, for sure.
Before we put the finishing touches on this game, how was the experience in going to Corvallis and going to Research Stadium?
Well, it's interesting because we stayed up in Portland. We stayed up in Portland. Left at like 9, thinking that the trip would be no problem to get there, but it took a long time for us to eventually get there. I was amazed at how similar everything that Oregon State does on game day, how similar it is to what San Diego State does. Like, it would not surprise me, and I don't know this for a fact, but it would not surprise me in any way, shape, or form if San Diego State went up and literally like modeled what they did after them. It was just, everything was just incredibly similar, from the way they run out onto the field. They have different places where their tunnels are, but it was just so much of thing. And then, their stadiums are very similar size. I thought that, it gave maybe a little bit, if you're walking into the stadium, what Snapdragon could be in a few years, with some of that stuff built out, that the party after the game kind of continued at some of the local establishments around it. But I thought it was terrific. It was a little weird. And I'm sure if I was there on a day that wasn't as perfect as Saturday was, that I would have appreciated it more. But the press box is completely enclosed. So like you can't hear any of the noise of the crowd. So like as an example, it was like halfway through the Star Spangled Banner when we were like, oh, Star Spangled Banner is going on, and we stood up, So that was a little bit of a separation.
That's how it was at Utah as well.
Okay, well maybe it's because they get in bad temperatures and that just like encourages people to show up. I don't know. It's just a different feel than what I've experienced at Snapdragon. But no, I thought it was a great experience. I think if everything goes to script and somehow San Diego State and Oregon State are in the same conference, I think that's definitely like a fun trip that every Aztec fan should make. It's the new stadium's really nice. The people are great. It's just college football at its best.
Yep, that's gonna do it for the grades for Oregon State. Paul and I will be right back to preview Boise State. Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. All right, Paul, actually, before we get into Boise State preview, article came out on Tuesday night from Yahoo Sports, I believe Ross Dellinger, writing about some sources or anonymous sources within the Mountain West and Pac-2 administrations, talking about one of the options thrown out there as part of a merger would be a European league, soccer leagues promotion relegation system that would, ultimately make a merger with the teams from the Mountain West, the two teams, the Oregon State and Washington State, potentially add two more teams from somewhere, and then make a Pac-12 and a Mountain West division of 8 teams, where you'll have 2 teams promoted and 2 teams relegated after each year or two. Interesting idea. Obviously, I think the people that were sourced said, it's not a done deal. It's one of the options of one of many, but it was something definitely that got a lot of people talking on Twitter and social media. What were your initial thoughts?
I think it's genius. I think the challenge that you have with the Mountain West is trying to figure out how to make their games more compelling. And some of the reasons that they're not compelling is they don't have this huge history over these rivalries that have happened for a long time, or rivalries that have happened at this like big stage. And the idea that they could be playing for inclusion in a better conference, I think it's smart. I think the other reasons why it's smart is because it allows all of the teams to be in together without necessarily diluting the amount of money that the teams at the top would get, which I think would be San Diego State most years. It causes excitement for it. I think it gives certain games on the schedule. I think it would give, those teams that are going to be relegated, I think it gives that, feel to it. I'd be really curious to see, like how they did that in terms of like, could they separate basketball and football in such a way where like you had different teams in the Mountain West for basketball and different teams, for football, and how all of those things would look. But, obviously how they would have to package it in the technical sense, in the legal sense, to continue to have it be two different conferences that would allow, two champions to be able to go to the NCAA tournament, two champions to be able to, compete for the playoff. But I think looking at if they're able to check those boxes and they're able to be able to, have two champions that go to NCAA tournament, to all the bowl tie-ins and the different things that can play into it, if they're able to check all those boxes and get it done, I just really can't see a downside. Why wouldn't you want to do that? It would incentivize when you go to boosters and you'd go to anybody and you'd say, look, here's the way it works. If we can get into this type of conference, it'll mean, instead of only having $5 million, it'll mean having 15, instead of having, whatever it is. And I think that you could really allow, whatever this new Pac-8 that we're talking about is, I think it can be a pretty good football conference, especially through the competition that, we've seen around the world with soccer that exists when relegation is part of it.
What I'll tell you is why I don't think this will work or happen is because the financial aspect of it. And they alluded to it in the article, like about budgets and financial, projections and things like that. Like there's been a lot of talk in the MLS world here in the US about doing that with the USL, right? We have the Loyal here, not for much longer, but the Loyal, the USL teams want to put this in effect with the MLS. Well, their winners, their top teams get promoted and MLS gets relegated. But none of the MLS owners are ever going to go for it because they bought these MLS teams and they would be signing up to maybe losing even more money by getting relegated to the USL. So it's never going to work. And I think it's going to struggle to get administrations to sign up for the potential of, like with the example they used was going from 15 million to 5 million or 10 million and not knowing the next year what your budget's going to be. And like your coaching salaries can't be adjusted unless you put in coaching contracts where if you're in the top league, you get paid X. If you're in the bottom league, you get paid less. What coach would want to sign up for that? You know what I mean? And
I saw that too, and I just didn't find it compelling. And the reason I didn't find it compelling is because there isn't already an established amount of money that these teams are getting. Like it's going to be more than whatever their television contract already is. And if, let's say, the top 6 teams in the Mountain West right now and Washington State and Oregon State really want to do it, I've heard that depending on how the court cases and all those things take out, there's potentially, hundreds of millions of dollars that's still left in the Pac-12. They could just go and form their own conference. And then the teams that are on the bottom could just be left with no conference, especially if, the Mountain West learns from whatever happens with the Pac-12 and this lawsuit and just keeps their mouth shut. Keeps their mouth shut, has a surprise meeting, and in the surprise meeting, they say Mountain West is done. And then 9 teams go over, and the 3 teams that would be objecting to this are left where? The WAC? So I think that's the part of it that I think that, and again, same thing with if you're Oregon State and you're Washington State and you've had this 30-year head start against all of these other schools, and your choice is to either dilute it automatically every year and share, or potentially hold on to more. I think you're going to gamble that you're going to hold on to more. I still don't think it's likely, but the money aspect of it is only because there's not already something in place. Like your example with the MLS is a great example, and that's the reason why it doesn't happen in MLS. But there is no MLS alternative that's in place right now between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West.
The article's assumption or wish about South Dakota State getting in, you can't have 2 SDSUs in the same conference. That would just be too confusing.
No. No, I think that would just be absolutely terrible. And again, they just threw them out. I don't know who those other two teams would be, but no, again, it's the same thing. I mean, like,
New
look at
Mexico State, right? Aren't they independent? New
not
Mexico
anymore. No, they're
State.
Conference Tuesday. I think there's a lot. I think there's a
That's
couple of
right.
teams that you could be
Yeah.
attracted to, but I just think it goes back to everything that's happening up in Boulder, and it's not that they're playing football that no one's ever seen before. It's that there is a sideshow that is compelling. And, I thought the best line was from some anonymous source where it's like, we always seem to be behind the eight ball or behind the times when it
Yeah.
comes to whatever. And we need to get out in front of it. And I think that having something that's different, I think is the only way that they're going to be able to compete and to create that buzz that other teams don't have. And to be able to go and to sell a relegation game, to be able to go and sell those kinds of things, I think can be really, really compelling. And then I also think that, when you're going to go sell your media rights to an entity, you want to get as many Oregon State, San Diego State, Washington State, Boise State, San Diego State, Air Force, Colorado State. You want to get as many of those matchups to say, look, pay us the premium dollar because every week you're going to have a matchup that's going to be as good as the bottom of the Big Ten and the middle of the Big 12 or something. And I think you also do that by getting those teams together without a full divorce from the people who are never chosen to be on TV unless they're playing one of the better schools anyway, just a compelling idea. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean that's something for future years, as maybe as early as 2024. But for 2023, the Aztecs are in the Mountain West Conference. They start
Sure.
conference play Friday night against Boise State. It's a red out, so encouraging fans. The school is encouraging fans to wear red. We'll see how many Aztec fans have red outfits, red shirts, things like
Yeah.
that. Boise State, I didn't realize this until I saw it in their game notes. They've been undefeated in the conference 3 of the last 4 years. They've
Yeah.
only won one of those. They lost to
Right.
Fresno last year. I think they lost. I don't remember who they lost to. One of those was the COVID year that didn't have a conference
San Jose
championship.
State.
San Jose State. That's right. Yeah. They're looked at as that guy that they've been to a New Year's Six bowl. They're kind of looked at as a cream of the crop, but they've also had their struggles winning conference championships. Aztecs won back to back in 15 and 16 and haven't won one in the last 6 years. So both of these teams and fan bases are hungry for a conference championship. We all remember last year, that second
Weird game.
half,
Such a weird game.
not just I remember a few weeks after that game when the defense turned things around. I spoke to Coach Maddox after practice on a game week, and he used the word travesty when he talked about the defensive performance in that second half against Boise. And first and foremost, he put it on himself as a coach, as a coordinator. But I always remembered that, like, that's how much badly they thought about that game. And I know it's been eating them. And Des Malone at the press conference said, "We have a bad taste in our mouth. It's a rivalry. We know what happened in that game, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen again." So, that's a lot of the same players are going to be there for Boise State. At least the quarterback, George Holani, has been injured the last 2 weeks, so we don't know his status. But Ashton Jeanty, who played last year and had a huge game, has had a monstrous start to this season. So, what are your first impressions on how this game could play out and how the Aztecs can at least stop that offense?
Yeah, it's so tough because Boise comes in 1-2, and obviously, if San Diego State gets a little bit of a question about how good they are because they lost to two now ranked teams. Well, they lost to a top 10 team on the road to open up the season, held their own early, and then just got kind of steamrolled by the Huskies. Then they had a game, where UCF went up to Boise, close game, but some turnovers kind of made that game a little closer than maybe the yardage would be indicated of. And then they go and they get the vertical passing game going against North Dakota State, and
North Dakota.
It wasn't State.
No, just North Dakota.
North Dakota. And but is that the good one or North Dakota State's the good one?
No, not the good one.
Okay, North Dakota State's the good one. Okay, and so it's hard to that makes it even more of a thing. So I thought, okay, well they're pretty good, like. So it's hard to be able to know exactly who they are, and watching some of like the highlight, watching some of the UCF game. I mean, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of misdirection, a lot of we're going to fake the hand up here, we're going to read, we're going to see what you can do, we're going to RPO, and so I just think that the key to it, as with anything, I think they got to stop the run first. They've been porous against the run. And I think Boise State wants to establish the run. And then I think after part of that is making sure that their quarterback, Taylor Green, does not get loose. But as far as the offense is concerned, I think it begins and ends with San Diego State, stopping the run and then trying to make Taylor Green be an accurate passer. If they can do that, I think they could be in decent shape.
Yeah, one of the things that just stood out from that second half performance last year is typically against a zone read or read option team, you take away one of them. You take away the inside run and the quarterback runs outside, or you take away the quarterback run and the inside run beats you. Well, both beat them last year.
It was like they weren't even on the field.
You're right. And that I think is going to be a lot better.
It can't be worse.
Yeah. I think Taylor Green has struggled passing the ball. I think his completion percentage is 53%. He's thrown 4 interceptions. They got Eric McAllister, who's kind of stepped up as like their main wide receiver this year. He can beat you deep, but he's also done a lot of underneath stuff. Stopping the run and making him a passer, like you said, is obviously the key. Easier said than done. When you got JNT, and we don't know about Holani status, but if he's in there, then you've got another guy to worry about. And at times you could have both guys out there and you don't really know if one of them is going to go out for a pass or what. So a lot to key in on as they prepare this week.
Yeah, and I would add, I think tackling in space is going to be important. I think Boise is going to do what it does, which is get their playmakers and try to get their playmakers in space. And I think San Diego State has an opportunity to be more physical, to get pressure on the quarterback. They're going to have to tackle well. I like the way Coach Hoke said it in the press conference today. They're looking forward to getting to see that middle screen again, because it's coming. I mean, like there's zero question that's going to pop up this week, as is the read option that they couldn't stop for the entire second half last year.
Yeah, offensively, obviously, we talked about what went wrong against Oregon State. They got to keep Jalen Mayden upright. BCD talked a lot about that at the press conference on Tuesday, making sure not just that he's not getting sacked, but he's not getting hit on dropbacks. But developing some sort of running game is just a must. You can't rely on Jalen Mayden to throw for 300 yards like he almost did last week,
right?
Because. And that's the other thing is big play. They still haven't thrown a pass over longer than 29 yards. Like, if you can run the ball and you can soften up that defense and you can bring a safety or two up, that can open up more downfield. And at this point, no defense is scared or worried about San Diego State beating them deep. Something's got to give eventually, and no better time than Boise State on a Friday night, first game of the conference season, to get that running game going. Now, Boise State, we talked about their defensive numbers have been really, really poor, but they've also played the top 2 offenses in the country. Washington and UCF are the only teams in the country that have averaged more than 600 yards per game. Now, some of that came against Boise, but those guys have also played other good teams and they've still put up those yards. So that's what you said was perfect. We really don't know what this Boise team is offensively and defensively. What we do know is that their special teams is elite, right? We just talked about how Jack Browning has been struggling the last few weeks. The guy that's supposed to be a great guy, and Luke Rosa, finalist, hopefully, right? Obviously, he's not on track for any of that. But Boise State has probably the best punter in the country and one of the best kickers in the country. And those guys have been, doing really well. So that's another aspect that, the special teams could become a big part of who wins this game too.
No, I agree. And you're always curious, what happens to those guys when they're kicking at elevation or not kicking at elevation. So I definitely think that's a key. And again, I think big plays is huge. We talked about that for Oregon State. I think it still applies. The defense can create a big play with either a return that gets the ball deep into, the opposition's territory. But, like the interceptions that took place, those were basically punts, right? Barfield was maybe like a short punt, but it didn't set up the offense in like unbelievable territory or anything like that. And so I think that's another way, whether it's causing a fumble, getting an interception, the offense might not have an 80-yard gain, a 60-yard gain or something like that, but the defense can also, the special teams can create a big play, if those opportunities are there. But I think both teams are in the same place. I'd say that San Diego State's work in the non-conference schedule was better than Boise's, and they have one more game to even that out. Obviously, Ohio has turned into a good win after Ohio beat Iowa State last week, 10-7. Offensive production that took place against Ohio, where everyone was like, "Oh, is this their offense? This is their offense," and Ohio has that's their worst offense. That was their worst defensive performance of the season. That doesn't look as bad. I thought there was a lot of positives. Same thing with Boise. I thought there were positives against Washington. Positive is UCF. Does maybe the equaling out, although Boise against UCF, this wouldn't be the case, but does the equaling out of some of the talent, not playing top 25 teams, not having quarterbacks that are just like super elite, does that make all of a sudden these teams that looked like they weren't very good suddenly are a lot better? But impossible to call a game that is the first game of the conference season a must win. And I don't think it is for Boise State. But with Air Force coming up next, who, is looking really good on the road, I think that San Diego State, the prospect of San Diego State starting 0-2 in conference play, between those two games that you have Boise State at home, I really think if they want to contend to get in that championship game, they're going to need a win on Friday.
I agree. I think this is a must win for the Aztecs for various reasons.
Must win. I know.
For
winning
the conference purposes, for fan morale purposes, for social media explosion purposes. I guess 2 and 3 go together, right?
Yeah.
Just the overall vibe and progression for the program. I think it's hard to put it on one game, but like a lot can change. And even Des Malone said something about like, this is a big game for us. I don't think he called it a must win, but I think he said this is a very important game to start conference and it could turn things around. And and that he could have been talking about just that morale that's going on around, from the alumni to the fans to everything that's related to that. And I think the players sense it. It is a big game. It's losing this game doesn't necessarily keep them from still going 7-1 and still basically guaranteeing themselves to a spot in that championship game, but that's going to be much harder. And so,
agreed.
We'll see.
Are they going to get it?
I have prediction time. I have San Diego State winning 27-24.
Ooh, that's an elbow. Nice. I'm gonna say that the demons of Jeff Heklinski are gonna be excised. Is that how you say that? They're gonna be removed. San Diego State wins 31-10.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. The game against Boise was the last game of the Heklinski tenure.
Yeah.
And the last game started by somebody other than Jalen Maiden at quarterback.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say they're gonna put a bow on that, and It'll give everybody one last time to cleanse their palate and complain about that, and then and then they'll move on to Air Force, and everybody will have a little bit of a different idea of the potential of this team.
Last thing before we get out of here, a roster update. A lot of people have been asking about Noah Avenger. He had shoulder surgery this past week, and he's obviously in line to probably redshirt. He played as a true freshman, so he hasn't used his redshirt, so he'll be using his redshirt, I assume, this year. Two guys that are no longer on the roster: Sam Dunnell was a true freshman, safety / corner, and Joseph Hall, who we had on the podcast, former military veteran in the Marine Corps. I actually had a chance to catch up with or speak to Joseph Hall and ask him about it. He mentioned someone that's put his body through a lot, 2 deployments in Afghanistan, military, junior college football, and now in D1. You know, just something that his body had taken a toll, and he was kind of ready to move on with the next chapters in his life. So that was what he told me. Haven't spoken to Sam Dunnell, haven't been able to see that. So I don't know what the story with Sam is. So whether he's, giving up football or whether he's going to look to enter the transfer portal and go somewhere else, yet to be determined or yet to be seen. So
no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that update on Joseph Hall. And I'm happy with the work that we were able to do to share his story. And because otherwise it would have just been this blip on the radar and nobody would have known anything about him. But remember, when we talked to him, he said that his dream and what he was fighting for in terms of playing, I shouldn't say fighting for when a person was Marine, what he was aiming for in playing Marine football and then going the junior college route is he wanted to make his dream come true of being able to run out of a D1, a tunnel. And he was able to make that dream come true. And, I can tell you, speaking from, the Marines that knew him, know obviously everything that he's done for the United States and stuff like that. I think everybody, can obviously respect that decision. And, it's a great kind of closure to that part. So I appreciate you, Andre, finding that out.
Yeah. Best wishes to him and Sam, of course. We'll see what happens with Sam, I'm sure, at some point. That's going to do it for us. Thanks, guys, for listening. As always, we appreciate it. All the likes, follows, subscribes, shares that you guys do on any of your favorite platforms. Keep it coming, and we'll keep putting out episodes. So talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.